Last week we spoke about Jesus being on the cross. We've been working our way through Matthew. He's about to die in the text. And we talked about how the Book of Mormon states that there would be darkness upon the land for 3 full days, where the Bible only talks about 3 hours. A few verses later, tonight, we read in Matthew 27:50 through 51, quote, Jesus, when he cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent, end quote. This is a very important passage relative to the Mormon Christian debate. Let me tell you why. A great many LDS people believe that what they do in their temples is actually reflective of the same things the children of Israel did in their singular temple on Mount Moriah. This is a comical idea. The purpose of the biblical temple was to teach atonement of sin as a precondition for authentic worship of the true and living God. Genesis 9 tells us that in the blood, quote, in the blood is life. And it was only in the shedding of blood, for them it was the shedding of blood of animals, that the children of Israel could have their sins covered or atoned until the coming of the only true Messiah who actually could pay for sin with his innocent blood. The altar was in front of the entrance to this temple of the Jews, symbolic that no one enters heaven without the sacrifice. It emphasized that God's love and acceptance can only be extended to sinners who have had their transgressions borne away by the shedding of blood. Solomon expressed the singular purpose of the temple in 2 Chronicles 2:6 when he said, Who am I then that I should build him a house, save only to burn sacrifice before him? There was the purpose of the temple, only to burn sacrifice before him. By contrast, Mormon temples exist as places to perform unusual and totally non-biblical rituals, such as Masonic-driven endowments, eternal marriages, family sealings, and baptisms for the dead, which had absolutely no place in the temple of ancient Israel. Mormons are taught also secret handshakes in those temples and are given secret names that are said to be necessary for them to whisper in the ear of somebody when they go to heaven. That way they would be allowed in. They are also put under oath. Any Mormon who goes into the temple is put under oath to swear they will give their total allegiance to the building up of the Mormon church. This includes any Mormon running for president. Part of Masonry? Absolutely. Part of the temple rituals of the children of Israel? Not in the least. According to the LDS Church itself, it is, quote, through their temple rituals that men and women can progress to become gods and goddesses. Not part of the ancient temple of the Jews. And where the Jews had and have only one temple location, there on Mount Moriah, typifying their faith in the one and only true and living God, Mormons have hundreds of temples, again, just like the Masons, and possibly signifying their belief in a multiplicity of gods, or polytheism. Often Mormons will read in the Bible about the laver in the temple on Mount Moriah, and they often liken it to these baptismal fonts that they have in their temples with 12 oxen underneath holding them up. But the Old Testament laver was located just outside of Solomon's temple, 2 Chronicles 4:2 and 15, and was used by the priests to wash themselves after offering animal sacrifices and in preparation for their ministry in the sanctuary. That was never, ever used for baptisms for the deceased. Mormons use their temples to actually perform rituals that are counter to what God says in his word. Like the eternal marriage sealings they perform. The Apostle Paul wrote in Romans 7:2 that marriage is for this life only, stating, quote, For the woman which has a husband is bound by the law to her husband only so long as he liveth. Likewise, Jesus himself taught us that people, quote, in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels in heaven. That's Matthew 22. Quite frankly, Mormonism breaks all sorts of biblical rules relative to their temple compared to the Jews. Here's some more. Only priests were allowed to enter the biblical temple. Worshippers, even the king of Israel, came no further than the altar of burnt offerings in the courtyard. But to the LDS, anybody with a temple recommend gets to go in. Secondly, all the activities in the biblical temple were open to knowledge. You can find them, you can read what they did in them in Exodus 30, Leviticus 4, 16, 24. But the Mormons keep everything they do in there supposedly secret. They say sacred. But to God, what they did in the temple was open and right there in the Bible. In sharp contrast to these facts, the Mormon temple has always been a thing of secrecy sworn to by oath, and up until before I left the Mormon church, by oath of loss of your life if you reveal what goes on in the temple. Finally, the Bible sets forth a strict lineage requirement for the children of Israel and officiating in the temple, the Aaronic priesthood. And it teaches very explicitly that only men from the tribe of Levi and the family line of Aaron were qualified to serve as priests in the temple sanctuary. Listen to this. The Mormon Church claims to have restored this Aaronic priesthood. It's now held by 12-year-old boys and completely ignores this plain scriptural requirement of lineage. And instead of allowing only one specific group to work in the temple, the LDS chose to keep one specific group out, black people, all the way up until 1978. Perhaps most important of all, the comparison between the LDS temples today and of Israel is how they view the life and death of Jesus. Even Bible-reading Christians know that the temple was made wholly obsolete by the death of Jesus Christ. At the end of his earthly ministry, Jesus predicted the Jerusalem temple was about to be destroyed, and he told his disciples, "Verily I tell you, there shall not be left one stone upon another." At that time of Titus, all the genealogical records torched, so the Jews couldn't see what their lineage was to perform things in the temple anymore. God said, "It is finished, it's done." Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith now, no more need for these temple rites or priesthood. Jesus also said that temple worship was going to be replaced by something. Look at this scripture in John 4, 21 and 23. Ready? Jesus said, "The hour comes when ye shall neither in this mountain," talking about Moriah, talking about the Jew of the temple of this, starts with an S, the Samaritans, "nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father, but the hour comes and now is when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship him." What Jesus was saying there is there's not going to be any more buildings made with hands to go in and do this worship. The Father seeks people to worship him directly, not in buildings. All of this was proven, and the temple worship was over when, at the very moment Jesus expired, the veil of the temple, top to bottom, ripped apart by God, which kept people from going into the Holy of Holies. The book of Hebrews makes it clear that all believers now have access into the heavenly Holy of Holies by virtue of our high priest, singular, Jesus Christ and his shed blood. Listen to what Hebrews says. "Seeing that we have a great high priest that is passed into the heavens," talking about Jesus, "Jesus, the Son of God, let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace in help in time of need." That's Hebrews 4. The rending of the veil we read about here in Matthew signified the end of the temple worship system. That system now obsolete. We no longer have human priests or temples to mediate between holy God and unclean men and women. Under the new covenant established by Jesus Christ, he is every believer's high priest who now stands permanently, once and for all, making mediation between us and the Father. Joseph Smith ignored all of these facts, and he took that temple veil and he tacked it back up, and he said to anybody who followed him, they have to comply to get through it in order to be right with God.